Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morning, everyone. Hope you are having a great week. We certainly have been. Just spent the last weekend in Rotorua doing a heap of running, van lifing, cold water thermogenesis dips. Currently we're running a cold thermogenesis challenge in my Mikki Williden Real Food Nutrition group, which is super fun, and basically trying to make the most of winter, really. So today on the podcast, I'm delighted to bring to you my discussion with Brodie Kane. Now, she is someone that takes making the most out of life to a next level. Those of you in New Zealand will be well familiar with Brodie in her work in radio, TV, 7 Sharp, Fair Go, and now she is the owner and operator of Brodie Kane Media. So now she's out there on her own, working in media, doing MC, public speaking, basically anything that comes her way, and doing it with real style. So Brodie and I talk about her upbringing, and I suppose how that plus her sort of early career has really launched her this platform to be able to make the most of every situation. And you'll hear us talk about how Brodie last year, in the midst of COVID, very early on, found out that she was no longer hosting the breakfast show in Christchurch where she currently lives. So that sort of forms, I suppose, a base for our discussion on how Brodie deals with curveballs that life throws at her and the things that she's learned, and just some of her, who inspires her in this media space. And I call her my mate Brodie because she really is everybody's mate. She's such a good Kiwi chick. So for those of you who are not so familiar with Brodie, she is an award-winning journalist, been in radio and television, and she currently is based in her home city of Christchurch here in New Zealand and working on some super cool projects. So she is a host of Girls Interrupted podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in New Zealand currently, and she's also got a new podcast called Kiwi Yarns, which she chats to a whole bunch of super interesting New Zealanders. She works on a number of content creation projects for various brands and also within media industry too. In addition to all her media work, Brodie is a bit of a superstar athlete as well. She has a background in surf life saving, something that she inherited from her parents, and she's super keen on those long endurance events, marathons, half marathons, coast to coast, and has, as you will hear us talk about, recently sort of taken up yoga as well, like every endurance athlete really should. So you can catch Brodie at brodieKaneMedia.com or just on Instagram at Brodie Kane. Please enjoy this conversation I have with Brodie Kane. Brodie Kane, how are you?
I'm actually good. I'm feeling good. It's a Monday, and I'm just easing into the week. I think sometimes Mondays should be a gentle start for as many people that can start gently. I highly recommend it. I started gently this week.
Mate, I understand. I teach for 4 hours on a Monday morning, but in part, I sort of want to slam myself into Monday to get it over and done with, I've tossed up over the years what actually works better for me. I've always hated them, to be perfectly honest.
I think it's funny because as much as there's all the, power of positive thinking and that, I just don't think you always have to be. And I think that when you've had such a lovely weekend or something and you've been with your mates and that, and then you've actually got to go back to the grind, it is okay to be like, ugh. So was fortunate enough that today I've scheduled most of my day to be in the afternoon. So I really did I got up, I had some brekkie and went for a swim, and now, the work starts in the afternoon. So that's something that I quite enjoy if I can do.
And for you, and I'm going to say thankfully for you at this point in time, you can do that. So you're no longer having to get yourself out of bed at 4:30 in the morning for a start. And we will get to just the change and your evolution of your career. Got to say, Brodie, I've been stalking you. I mean, I do anyway, like 38,000 other people. I might have actually underestimated that. And it's almost like we're living parallel lives. So, had a long run. You went to Crowded House. You had a swim this morning. I did all of those things as well. Had a beersy or a wine or some kind of alcoholic beverage. And I'm like, mate, Brodie, you are living my life. I think we're very alike, actually.
Well, there you go. It's a great life to live.
It is. The other thing I know, or I think I know about you, is you've got a bit of a penchant for fried chicken. Is that right?
Oh, my word. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, actually, all chicken, to be fair. I mean, you know, like a beautiful buttermilk fried chicken or a karaage chicken, or, I mean, I'm like, you bring me home a hot chook from the supermarket with some fresh buns and you've sold me. So, yeah, it's a running joke with all my friends and stuff like that as well, because quite often it's just like, oh, I don't really feel like anything else other than chicken. And so quite often I'll just get chicken. And they're like, is that it? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm perfectly content. It's a real big, strong passion of mine.
You know, Brodie, I love fried chicken. It's my favourite thing. When I was doing a little bit of background research on you, which is pretty easy to find information because you are like everywhere. I'm like, mate, not only does she like running, she likes fried chicken as well. You're a girl after my own heart.
Well, and the good thing is if you've gone for a big long run, you know, you need the protein and you need to replace it. So it's the best day to have the fried chicken after the long run.
Well, to be fair, I would know a bit about that given my nutritionist, you know, status.
So it gets the tick of approval. We can do it on the run day, eh? Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you do it on the non-run day, that's fine because you're going to be running tomorrow anyway, really, aren't you?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So, Brodie, like, I suppose the one thing that does differentiate you and I, other than the fact that you're a few years younger than me and you're in the South Island, which I love, the South Island, you're a bit of a celeb, which I am not. And interesting, like I was, again, doing some background recce on you, and you have done quite a bit in all of your years. And you are, you know, you're such an influencer out there now, and I suppose your career has really evolved. And in some ways, and I might be wrong, absolutely correct me, obviously, you've said in the past, right time, right place, but a lot of hard grind from your early days as being a bit of a roadie for The Rock.
Mm-hmm. Trees, yeah. Yes. Can confirm that. That was back in, while I was at uni. I think that was like first and second year uni.
Amazing. To then kind of like knock on some doors, put your foot in alongside with getting the quals in broadcasting, postgraduate kind of journalist. Is that right? Postgrad
journalism at Canterbury, yep.
Yep. To then end up on our airwaves and on our screens. What a road, Brodie.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think that, what am I turning this year? For a whole year I thought I was younger than I was, but I'm pretty, what am I turning? I think I'm 35 this year. And I think I don't know, if I look back at it all, it does sound like it's all pretty non-stop. I've always been incredibly determined, and that sort of, I think, has been really helpful in striving for what you want, and I've always been someone that's set goals and always been someone that's looking ahead and what am I doing this year, what do I want to do maybe next year, and not being always that's not saying that you that might change, because I think what I like that I've done is I guess it probably happened more so in the late 20s, that you find that it's okay to have goals and that, but if the goalposts shift, or you need to sort of take a career turn or something, that's actually okay. So I've actually always been quite open-minded towards that. And I think that if you kind of go into things going, well, this is right for now and this is not right for right now, and sort of roll with the punches, sometimes I think that that's quite a good way to operate. And I've always really, really loved what I've done. That hasn't meant that it hasn't been hard, and the sort of you have your good days and you have your bad days, and you have jobs that will really test you. But I think if you remind yourself why you're doing it, And if you can't answer that, then, you know, maybe it's time to look elsewhere. So I've always thought that I've been quite, and that's probably to do with my, you know, my family, my parents, and values and things that are being taught, is to just, you know, make sure you remember your why.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and I suppose you have to when you're doing kind of right at that base level of you're cooking sausages outside the warehouse or wherever it was that you're cooking sausages, and in your early years, probably thinking in your head, you know, it's, well, at least you think you're a people person, so actually, like jobs like that, I imagine, yes, it's work, but it's also, you know, it's kind of fun to kind of do that, but also with that goal in mind of, I'm doing this because I know that this is just a stepping stone to get to where you want to be, hopefully, in the end. It might take a few years, but that's putting in the groundwork. And you don't seem like a person that's at all afraid to put in the groundwork.
Well, I think that even if I look back at when I was a young kid and a teenager and stuff, and I was, you know, like some people are lucky, some people are naturally gifted, some people are jammy, but I think, you know, that's probably a small selection of people in various pockets of the world or their lives, and I might be really lucky in some realms and not in others. But I kind of have learnt from a young age that, you know, you have to work hard to succeed. That you should work hard, and that things shouldn't fall on your lap. And if one day that happens, great, you make the most of that, but also be very, very grateful for that. So yeah, when I was a teenager and stuff, playing sport and that kind of stuff, or, you know, even studying, I had to work hard to do well. So I think if it's drilled into you at a young age, then you're aware of that. And I mean, you know, when I was starting out early as a journalist, you know, you wanted things, you know, you're young and you wanted things the next day. You know, you're like, why aren't I doing this job yet? I mean, I've been doing this but you know, you just, that with time, you appreciate that there's nothing actually wrong with being hungry for something, but also, you know, a bit of patience and just chipping away. And then, you know, as you get older, you realize that that's really, really important as well. Just to, you know, things will happen if you know, you align the stars yourself, they will happen.
Yeah, and did you always want to be kind of on the airwaves, or was it more journalism? Was print or a print media, I suppose? Was there anything that kind of was on your radar as well, Brodie?
So I definitely wanted to be a journalist, and, you know, when I was so I wanted to be a war correspondent. Like mum and that were like, I don't know about that, but I wanted to travel the world and learn about the world and stuff. And so I, you know, went to uni and I studied journalism, and then I started working at Radio Live was my first job, and then had a few years there, and then went to News Talk ZB, then travelled and loved being a journalist. Absolutely, you know, really, really have such fond memories of the jobs that were strictly journalism. And obviously then I came back from overseas and I worked on Q&A, the political show, and then 7 Sharp, Seven Sharp, then Fair Go, and then on to presenting sport on breakfast, and then on to entertainment-based radio. So it's not like you can't still say that you're a journalist, but like, for instance, when I was working with Fitzy on the hits, you could offer your journalism expertise and you know, you still are a journalist, but the job had changed somewhat, and it probably had a little bit in a couple of the other ones where you're being asked to inject your personality into things, which is not really, you know, what you're taught to do as a journalist. So for a while there, when that was kind of happening, it was a bit of a like, oh, but that's not true journalism, and, you know, you'd have these sort of like moralistic battles. But then you were kind of like, well, if I'm enjoying this and this is something that is required of me and the feedback is really good, then maybe you do just move away from it a little bit. So I like to think that I'm very proud and grateful of what I've learnt over the years as a journalist, and the skills that you last forever, you know. Understanding the law and ethics is really, really important, and I find it really, really important, obviously, as well, with the growing I guess, the growing and changing dynamic of social media, which, you know, there's a lot of grey out there with that. But I'm stoked that, you know, I did so much work as a journalist, and probably not on the day-to-day do as much, but it's like riding a bike. You'll always do it. You'll always love it.
Oh, totally. And I definitely want to come back to, you know, some of your earlier career and ask you a little bit about that. But I mean, I look at what you do out there on social media, and I do think, you know, what you've had to learn as part of your career with journalism has meant that you are less likely to fall into that grey zone when it comes to social media and what you can and can't do, which is obviously a really good thing, you know, because you've seen, oh well, at least I've seen on my Instagram feed over the last year quite a lot of backlash against, for want of a better word, influencers. And I feel you're more than an influencer, you know, like, and I don't want to, that sounds like I think influencer isn't something that you want to be, but you know what I mean?
Well,
like
unfortunately, the word's been tarnished by influencers.
You
know, like the word has been sort of bastardized, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. But essentially, you know, like, you are less likely to fall into the same traps that others have who wouldn't have learnt some of those morals or ethics that you would have had to be quite clear about with your kind of journalistic background. And not only journalism, I mean, let's face it, when you're getting up and you're part of someone's morning, there are obviously sort of lines that you don't cross and things that you have to be aware of there too, right?
Oh, yeah. And I think I think that we should all, you know, like anyone that almost has a social media account now should have to take some sort of like online crash course in terms of the do's and the don'ts, you know. So, you know, and it is scary when you're looking in this world of people questioning information and people doubting facts and people finding other bits of information from non-reliable sources and conspiracies and that. And it's really, really worrying, you know, and I don't know what the answer is to sort of like pull it back. I don't know if there is. I mean, I don't know what the guy's name was that created the internet. I'm sure if he was around, he'd be horrified to know, you know, how it's sort of morphed into this uncontrollable monster. But yeah, I think that we need to do a bit more in terms of how information and that is out there, but I don't have the answers.
No, I totally know, and that's the problem with conspiracy theories, right? There's this thread of truth that runs through something, so if someone sees that, as there always is, it's any kind of pseudoscience, and then that's where the conspiracy kind of builds from, and you know, your general population who doesn't necessarily know how to read science or wouldn't, you know, can look at a YouTube and go, wow, that's so compelling and so convincing. I don't know.
But you'd get that too in your line of work, like with people that are just all of a sudden overnight experts and telling you what to have with your smoothie in the morning and stuff like that.
Oh, mate, and Game Changers, really good example of really bad science. And it just took the whole vegetarian thing to new heights. But back to you, Brodie.
Yes.
You moved from Christchurch to Auckland, is that right? Radio Live?
Yes, yep.
It's kind of like just gathering stories for the newsroom. I don't know, I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, so you it's interesting when people are not always entirely sure what a radio journalist does, because quite often when you're in your car listening to the radio, you'll hear that news bulletin. Well, that's what all the like you'll hear the newsreader read it, but the journalists in the newsroom will write and produce that stuff, and you know, and you go out and you know you might be at a, I don't know, like you might be go grim. You might be at a homicide inquiry, and you've gone out there and you've interviewed the police officer. Then you come back in and you slice up bits of audio and write the story, and then that gets put in the bulletin. So you're actually, you know, in the radio journalism side of things, you're a lot of the time you're sort of behind the scenes or doing, you know, live crosses with some of the radio hosts and stuff like that. But great, like, amazing job, radio journalism, because you just get to do everything. You just get to do absolutely everything. You're thrown into all sorts of stories.
Yeah, and was that move from Christchurch to Auckland, was it daunting for you, Brodie, or were you just like amping for it at that point?
No, I think I was really excited. And, you know, there was actually a couple of mates of mine moved up around the same time. And it wasn't so daunting because I'd already been doing some like kind of interning at Radio Live, and I'd worked at Radio Works. So I didn't feel like a completely new kid at school. But then I remember moving up to Auckland, and I actually remember the most overwhelming thing that I think, I don't know whether I'd notice it now, was that just everyone was really well put together. You know what I mean? Like everyone in Auckland no one was seemed to be at the supermarket in their track pants, or, you know, everyone just seemed so incredibly well groomed. And you'd go to the gym and it was like, oh my God, this place is full of like models and this is really intimidating. And so you kind of got sucked in and being a bit overwhelmed about superficial stuff, actually, more than anything. Then you kind of got over that. You got your group of mates, you know, you met some people, got some group of mates, and I love living in Auckland. And I've moved back down to Christchurch and then back up to Auckland, I think 3 times in total since 2007. So I've done it a fair bit.
You've managed to avoid Wellington, which is awesome. Well done.
Well, I love Wellington, and they say you can't beat it on a good day. But yeah, I've never lived there, and I don't know if I could deal with the wind. I love it.
I know.
I just don't think I could do the wind.
Again, Brodie, I'm absolutely with you on that. I love Wellington to bits, but my God, every time I'm there, I'm in such a grump because that wind just really kind of messes with my constitution. You know, I'm not quite built for it.
Yeah.
So, any real highlights from your early days at Radio Live or even your early News Talk ZB? Like any things that really stand out for you professionally or that kind of might have changed you or helped you develop personally?
I mean, when I worked at Radio Live, we were a really small newsroom. And I remember actually, I think it was my second ever day, and my news editor at the time printed out this piece of paper for me and sent me away to the High Court in Auckland to go to the depositions hearing of Chris Kahui, who you remember was accused but then acquitted of the murders of his twin babies. And so I had never been to a High Court, and I had this piece of paper and had to go there and cover that. And then I actually covered the trial as well, and quite a few other big court cases. Like I covered that one and the Nia Glassie trial in Rotorua, which was a really, really hard 4 weeks to sort of be involved in that, and quite a number of other high profile murder trials. So a lot of crime, a lot of crime in my early days as a journalist. And it was something that it's weird to say, it's not that you enjoy it, it's not like, oh, this is fun, but I really was interested in the criminal justice system. So I did, you know, and so I don't know if you say that but I learned a lot and met some, you know, pretty amazing New Zealanders that are involved in tirelessly working to make New Zealand a safer place and that. So I remember that period of work really well. But I mean, even just your newsroom chats, you know, like the people that you spend time with in a newsroom it is like family. Yeah. So you create that, you have this real sense of community, and you work these ridiculous hours, and you know it just when you get together with people that you haven't seen in a year, you sit there and you trade war stories and like it was yesterday, and so I really, really love that and can remember many things like they were yesterday. You know, it was good fun. You know, it was hard work, but it was really good fun. But I would say that you know, things that stand out are being involved in some of those very high profile criminal cases and what you learnt from that, and you know, opening your eyes to things that are happening, you know, good or otherwise. You know, so that would be the answer to that one.
Yeah, and you were so young at the time as well, right? Because you worked there for 3 years before, or I don't, maybe that's wrong actually, but when you were 24, is that when you went overseas, over to London for a few months?
Yeah, it must have been, it was 2011. You must have been turning 25 that year, because it was the year of the earthquake in Christchurch, and I moved down to, I was leaving News Talk, and then the earthquake happened. Then I came down because I was coming down anyway before I was going overseas, and so I worked for them for another few weeks before I went for the and covered the aftermath of that huge tragedy. and then I went overseas. So yeah, I'd squeezed in a lot of work before going overseas.
And was it a hard decision, Brodie, to kind of, because you're kind of 24, slightly older than typically, people do a 3-year degree and then hoof it over to London. You kind of started to, I guess, make a name for yourself, and then to go, right, now I'm going to go and do my OE. Was that a big decision to do at that point, or?
No, I was ready for it. Well, I felt like I was like, right, I've got to go. And I just thought, if I don't do it now, like, it's that kind of thing where you're like, well, you can come back to a job, you can come back to a career, but go and have your fun, go and see the world. So it wasn't actually a tricky decision at all. It was more like, right, let's start saving some money and let's get over there. And ended up being away for, I think it was 13 months actually. I was away, and I just had a great time. And yeah, that was a wild year. It was epic.
Yeah. And with your family being in Christchurch with the Christchurch earthquakes and things like that, when you came back just for that couple of weeks to do a bit of covering it, were there any kind of thoughts in your mind of, I'm leaving my mum and
yeah. I mean, it was tough because we have we're a really close family, and I sort of felt bad that I was leaving. They were okay, and the house suffered damage, but it wasn't anywhere near what so many people were going through, and it was livable, and toilet was flushing and all of that. So they were fine. But you did feel a long way from home, but also, they're like, you can't let that kind of thing stop you. So it was okay. I'm pretty sure once I was on the plane and landed in Bali, I was like, right, it's time to be a young person now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, given, I suppose, how your career had progressed with, as you say, like covering a lot of that kind of the political side of things and the justice system side of things, like I imagine that makes someone grow up pretty quick, compared to, say, going into, again, sounds like I'm going to be disparaging another profession, but a typical corporate kind of job where you go into a bank and you start working, like your career progress, like you're just exposed to a lot more, I suppose, and then you have to be involved and you have to know what's going on outside of your own wee world. So probably quite timely for you to go, woohoo, be a young person.
Yeah, it was just, I think, if anyone can do it, they should do it. We live and I think it makes you far more aware of what's actually going on in our country as well. I think it's very easy to live in New Zealand and take a lot for granted, or be sort of in a bit of a bubble, to use a buzzword, and sort of have your blinkers on, whereas you go and spend some time on the other side of the world and you realise, that that what we've got here is pretty unique. Absolutely not without our issues. But certainly makes you aware of how things are working around the world,
Yeah. And like thinking back, like who were your kind of mentors or your inspirations in that whole kind of journalism, TV, radio space, like people that really either mentored you or you looked up to and really kind of wanted to emulate to some degree?
Well, I think that there's and there still is so many amazing women in the media, and you'd hear women like Kim Hill on Radio New Zealand and just be like, oh my God, I'd love to be able to interview like that. And of course, Ali Moore was someone that I always looked up to, and Hilary Barry, Christine Amanpour, who's on CNN. She's still one of the main I think she's chief international correspondent for CNN. And so you were never, you could always see these wonderful, strong women and just think, yeah, I think I could be like that too. And I remember actually, and I'm very, very fortunate that, well, I've worked with Ali and I've worked with Hilary, and I remember Ali once took me out. You always wonder what these people might be really, people always ask, oh, what's so-and-so really like? What's so-and-so really like? And so many people can have such a long-lasting effect on you, and also make you appreciative, and also make you want to pass on what they have to you. Like I remember working at Q&A, and then I got my next job on 7 Sharp, and I hadn't really been on screen before. And Ellie took half a morning, to come out with me. We booked a camera and we went, and she taught me how to do piece to cameras. And I'll always remember that, and I'll remember the day, and I'll remember her pointers and that kind of thing. And lots of wonderful tidbits of advice from wonderful producers. I've worked with another amazing woman that I worked with that I learned a lot from, was Shalene Hearn and Brian McCormick, who are amazing, more behind the scenes kind of producers that just incredible to work with. So I've been really, really lucky that through the course of my career, there's been some pretty amazing people, particularly, the amazing women are really memorable for me. So really, really lucky to have had that kind of involvement with them.
Awesome. And as I understand it, you were overseas when you got the kind of call up to come back to New Zealand, or you started looking for jobs to come back to, and that's when you kind of started going on into TV rather than being on radio. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was living in London, I was sleeping on a mate's couch, I was earning £6 an hour, and I was having a great time, but I was like, okay, I need to go home now. I need to get back into the swing of things. I was missing working as a journalist, and it kind of was a bit like Murphy's Law. I literally did this job interview for Q&A. And then about the second day after that, I finally, after emailing for months and months, the BBC, I finally got a shift there. But then the next day, got the TVNZ job, and I was like, oh, what are you going to do? And then I was like, nah, okay, I think that if I go home, I can give this job a really good crack and pave out a really, a strong career at home. And I sort of was like, if I stay here and work at the BBC, not that there's anything wrong with being at the bottom of the food chain, but I was working around people that knew 3 or 4 languages, Yeah. And I also was like, classic young person, was like, okay, so if I work there, it's going to take me X amount of months to save up for, to move into a place. Yeah. Or do I stay living on the couch and save X amount to travel in the summer? And then I was like, oh my God, grow up and go home.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's cool. I've got unfinished business over here, but let's go home and rip into it. And it was a great job. Yeah, I loved working on Q&A. So yeah, came home and it was like, sweet, ready to go. Let's do it. Back to Auckland,
That's awesome. And then 7 Sharp, and I think that's when I think, because Q&A is probably, I'm not, I'm probably a bit ignorant when it comes to politics and stuff like that. Oh, slightly less so now I'm older, but certainly back then I would have been slightly more so. So 7 Sharp was when I remember, I think, seeing you, Brodie, and I think we actually met on either 7 Sharp or Fair Go. You came in.
Yeah, we did the, I remember, I think we've done a few things together, but I particularly remember the detox diets on Fair Go.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
The old debunking the detox diets.
Oh, I always love a good debunk of that. It's always quite good, eh?
Yeah, I remember that well.
Yeah, nice. And so anything in particular there that, who have you met outside of, I suppose, your colleagues or, people in your industry that really stood out to you in your kind of later years? Like Kiwis, international people?
Oh, I mean, do you know what? It's funny because you always think of oh my God, who's the most amazing person you've interviewed, or, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I think the most starstruck I've ever been was when I got to interview Mick Fleetwood. I was this is a rock and roll star. They don't get bigger than this. And he was so tall and just so rock and roll. And I was just like, be cool. And, and you're like, oh my God, he's done how many thousands of interviews would he have done? And you're thinking, how am I going to make this different? And what am I going to ask him that he hasn't been asked and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So, but it was great. I loved that. And I've met some wonderful sports people as well. I mean, we are so lucky here in New Zealand that by and large, our sports people are just fantastic human beings because they're Kiwis. And so, watching someone like Lisa Carrington and the success that she's achieved, and I used to do surf club with her, and I always say to her, You remember, like, when we were like 17, I did beat you a couple of times. She's like, yeah, radio. You know, so we have such great access to our sports people, which I think we really should be grateful for. But also equally is just everyday Kiwis. You know, when I worked on breakfast, you would travel all around the country and you'd go to, like, you know, I remember one day going to Onga Onga School in Central Hawke's Bay. And, you know, and they were just the coolest kids. The whole school were like so excited to have breakfast there. And like getting to get around the country and meet people that are just every single day making New Zealand a better place in their own way. You know, I feel very fortunate that I've been able to meet a lot of those kind of people. And that's why I love storytelling. That's why I feel like I feel lucky to have that job, because in the various ways that you can do it, and you can do it with podcasting, you can do it with video content, you know, and that's what's beautiful about it's what I find beautiful about the media, is that you can tell people's stories, and people's stories deserve to be told. So I feel very lucky that I've got to do a lot of that over the past 13 years.
Yeah, it is amazing, you're right. And of course you're continuing to do it, at least with the audio, with your the Kiwi Yarn podcast. And of course the Girls Uninterrupted, which was the Girls on Top, but just a same podcast, different name.
Yeah, we had to we relaunched when we were no longer employed by NZME, which is sweet. And so we relaunched in the middle of lockdown last year. And so so two different podcasts. That one's been going for it'll be coming up 3 years soon. And that sort of morphed into something that we're really proud of in terms of it being we want it to be a safe, fun environment, primarily for women. You know, it's not like anti-men, my God, or not encouraging them to listen, but we want it to be a community for women to hear us say what they might be too scared to say, or talk about sex and talk about careers and talk about anything that you as your girlfriends would sit around and have a wine with, you know, and but, you know, but also find that balance of serious and funny and light and shade as well. So we really, really love doing that, and really, really proud of that, creating that kind of environment. And then Kiwi Yarns is at the moment really more like a selfish passion project, because I love speaking to people and hearing their stories. So when you're not necessarily working anywhere where you can do that in a I guess mainstream, you just create your own podcast and away you go. So that sort of gives me that real rewarding kind of feeling to, you know, go away again and do all my research and chat to people and you know, and you'll know as well how lovely it is in a podcast format, because you're not having to rush. It's not, you know, that you know that it's not a 15-second soundbite, or like that you've only got 3 minutes. So that's why I think podcasting's so great.
Oh, I love it. And that's what Mikkipedia is, right? It's absolutely just because I wanted to email a whole bunch of people I'd been dying to talk to and go, hey, can I just ask you about yourself? You know, all the things that go through my head when I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm seeing Brodie, you know, go for some, like, oh, what's Brodie training for? Oh, I know, actually, the 2-day coast to coast, which doesn't actually involve swimming, which I know you know, because you've done it multiple times in various forms. But you're right, podcasting is so like that. Girls Uninterrupted, though, is brilliant because it's what people love. This is the whole thing with social media, right? We want to know more about Brodie. We want to know what Brodie and her mates think about these things, which me and my girlfriends talk about, and, you know, but is what we're thinking about and talking about in that space. Is that how everyone else thinks about it? So that is the beautiful thing about your podcast, Brodie. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of started as it's just morphed into, you know, it's morphed into that. And we did a bit of a tour last year, and we're going to tour again. I'm going to go on tour again. And
brilliant,
because I think I remember going probably a couple of years ago. I was asked to speak at an event which was, you know, for women to come along. It was like a brunch thing. And I just went, oh my God, we should be doing more of this, because nothing is more rewarding and heartwarming and powerful than a bunch of women getting together meeting and networking and chatting and laughing. And, I wanted us to do that because I remember that feeling and how great it was. And I think that we need to be doing more things like that where we get together, and because it really, really lifts you up. So
Yeah.
I hope to do a lot more of that. And that again, that goes to, about what the podcast is about is, it's a product. So, but it's also about making people feel good and making people feel involved and relate, being able to relate to things, or, but also disagree with something I might say but agree with Caitlin or agree with Gracie. It's still can have that element of people that are quite different, coming together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like that connection that might be built in our ears whilst we're listening to the weekly podcast, but then you actually have that face-to-face gathering as well, because those social connections are so key, right?
Absolutely.
Now, Brodie, you were with TVNZ for, I believe, like close to 6 years, and then you went on to the radio show with, is it Andrew Fitzgerald, is that right? Dave, Dave.
Right.
Obviously, being in Auckland or Dunedin, Dave wasn't on my airways.
No, he wasn't.
No, but that was kind of like, I've heard you say you're not such an early morning person.
Oh, yeah.
But you had to get in a good routine for those early mornings.
Well, because the funny thing was I left breakfast to go and do the hits in the mornings. So actually going from breakfast, which was a 3:30 alarm, to a 4:30 alarms felt like a dream. It was like, oh, that is fine, So when I worked on breakfast, I mean, it was one of the funnest jobs that it was so much fun and great team, but gosh, those hours, and you just it's a constant state of jet lag. Honestly, yeah. And you'd get to 6:30 at night, halfway through the news, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go to bed soon. So the hours were tricky. So then when I got to radio, I sort of told myself it was a bit more of a treat that it was an hour later. And do I think you get used to it? Kind of I think that when I actually moved back to Christchurch and did the radio job, I got myself into a really good routine. Good eating and good exercise and really prioritize those things. So by and large, I did feel quite good through that. But I do remember when I finished that job pretty much about just over a year ago now, I remember, and then we went into lockdown and stuff, and man, I reckon about 3 or 4 weeks of I did not set my alarm, and I was just sleeping 10, 11 hours a night for 3 or 4 weeks. And I was like, that must be me catching up in just the most glorious sleeps. So, and then I remember saying to my PT, he was like, oh, if you can get back into a routine of not stupid early, but I'm sort of now between a sort of a 7 and 8. 7 and 8
oh,
is
lovely.
where I operate. If I have to be earlier, that's fine. I'm not, if I have to get up early now, it's not like, oh God, but I like 7 o'clock, so 7 to 7:30 is where I like to be.
Okay, so a couple of questions, because I've always wanted to know this about people who have to get up that early. So would you have a nap during the day, Brodie, when you're on your 3:30 a.m.?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Professional napper.
Yeah.
Where possible. You couldn't always have one, and there's some strict guidelines, you can't start one after 4 p.m. That's too late. Prime time is about 1 or 2, and no longer than an hour.
Yeah. It's interesting. I find, with a lot of my clients, particularly women, they do not nap. They don't let themselves nap. And part of me thinks it's this whole idea, and I don't know whether you've come across this with all of the people that you've interviewed or just that you kind of engage with on social and stuff, is that women feel like there must be something else for me to do. If I've got an hour to nap, then I could be spending an hour doing washing or doing this other job or, hoovering or something. Men are much better at it. So I'm so pleased that...
I wasn't a napper before that job, and then it actually became a part of your day. You'd plan it. And I which is now in turn given me a real passion for naps. I just think they're just the most beautiful thing. You don't always need them, but if you feel like if you're in a position on the weekend and it's, you know, a Saturday afternoon or something and you're like, oh, I just think you should embrace it. They're such a beautiful thing.
It's brilliant. I love it. And what time would you go to bed?
Oh, the 3:30 shifts, it was like 8:30 would be the latest, you know, but yeah, sort of, yeah, usually, I mean, I always found it hard to go to bed, unless I was absolutely knackered, you know. It was easier in winter to go to bed earlier when it was dark, but summer's the pits when you've got to go to bed and it's still light. So yeah, it was usually around 8 to 8:30, sometimes 9, and sometimes you'd travel, is what, you know, like there was a lot of travel involved in that job, so you would, you know, be flying all over the country and stuff. But I became really good at sleeping on the planes too. And sometimes when you'd travel though, you'd do your own hair and makeup and not have to be up as early. So you'd be like, oh, I can stay up till 9 because I don't have to get up till 4:30. So you become very good at getting up and just going straight into autopilot.
Yeah, nice. Now, Brodie, as you said just before that you finished up at that job like almost a year ago now, just before lockdown, was that a surprise to you? Like,
Yep.
Was it?
Yeah,
so you guys didn't have an idea?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't expected. So it did come as quite a shock, to be honest. And you know, I wasn't expecting it at all. And that's okay though. We went through a process, and then that's what happened. And I think you would, if you talk to anyone that was made redundant, there's a definite set of emotions that you sort of go through. But then I sort of, you know, I had some great people around me, and it was like, right, well, okay, that's happened. Can't really do much about that now. So we've kind of got to draw a line in the sand. But then, of course, lockdown happened and the pandemic, you know, accelerated. And I had a couple of other things that were supposed to be on the go, and then they stopped. And then it was kind of like you felt this incredibly like that you had no control over anything. So I have to admit that and I did lock down with Mum out here at Waikaku Beach, and she will probably attest to the fact that at least the first week, probably into the second week, I was a bit all over the place. And it was more so because I didn't have control over what was happening, but also was watching what was happening in the media industry and going, oh my God, I'm not going to get a job. What am I going to do? And there was nothing at that point in time. We're all at home. So I just felt really helpless, but then managed to just go, mate, just relax, just take your time. And so, you know, and I did, and I got myself into a very good like lockdown routine of nice walks and nice runs and nice gins and nice food and like, you know, and just went, okay, well, can't really do much about this right now. But then did start that, you know, that's when we rebranded the girls podcast. So that was a good, that was a good time killer because I had to learn how to do all of that. And then it was just the slow chip away of, well, is this the time to maybe start working for yourself? And you,
was that always
you call
on
the
your
shots.
agenda?
Do you know what? Yes, I have always thought it would be great to contract out, essentially. So, you know, you are sort of the architect of what you want to do. And so that had always been something that I thought would be great, where you could be where you could get yourself and your skill set and your reputation into a position where you can go from this and, you know, do a project here and then move to something else and work, you know. And so I've always thought that would be great. Sometimes it takes maybe a decision that, you know, that's out of your hands to give something like that a crack. So I think that, you know, with what happened last year, then it was like, okay, well, maybe this is the universe telling you that now's the time. So and yeah, I mean, there's been, you know, it's been Brodie Kane Media officially launched in July. You know, got the old company certificate and stuff like that. And I have to say, between now and then, you definitely have days where you think, what are you doing? I've got no idea. Oh my God, am I going to be able to afford life? You know, or everything. Well, the mortgage, shit, you know, all of these things. But it's so rewarding working for yourself. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got some amazing creative ideas, like Brodie's Roadie. You know, like you accidentally buy a barlina up in Auckland, and you're like, right, I'm just gonna create this whole thing around actually going to get it. Like, where do they come? Have you always been that creative?
Well, I think that, I don't know, I just like entertaining and making people laugh and feel good. And, I think that if you've got something worth sharing that's funny and engaging, then, and like the roadie was, I wasn't on television, I wasn't on radio, but it would have been no different to a content plan that could have been executed on either of those platforms. And I was like, well, stuff it. I don't have either of those, but let's just do it anyway, So that's kind of, where that, well, I mean, my friend did actually legitimately buy a barlina in the wrong city. So that happened. And we were like, I was like, oh, come on, let's go. And then it was like, oh my God. And then, of course, when Roadie rhymed with Brodie, it was like, oh, this is destiny.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And so it's been, it's like when Mum and I set up the Jobo show through lockdown and interviewed a whole bunch of Kiwis and stuff and went, okay, well, we don't have our own TV show, but we've got an Instagram account. Let's just give it a crack. And, so there's a lot of options that are not necessarily tied to traditional forms of media that people are still really interested in listening and watching. So if you can't quite make it to the mainstream, just do it everywhere else.
Totally, and to be fair, like so many more people are probably not necessarily getting rid of mainstream, but they're turning to the newer, the Instagram and the those type of platforms to get their news and get their entertainment and things like that. I mean, I don't know, I hardly ever watch. I can't think of the last time I watched TV, for anything other than what was actually on the other digital platforms. Like, kind of where things are moving from too.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, I think that, journalism is incredibly important, and we need to trust and rely on our news sources now more than ever. But you're right, the way that people want to access that has changed. So people are having to improvise and know that, like, this, when there's in the middle of a crisis, everyone is going to turn on the news at 6:00. But also, but businesses like that and that are also realizing that that's not, people aren't doing that every day. They're not waiting till 6:00 to get the news, or they're not getting the paper in the morning, or, so there is a lot of change. We're in the midst of a lot of change in terms of how people are accessing or choosing to access their content. So to give people more options is great.
Brodie, like, has being on like kind of your own entity, if you like, and being solely on these other kind of platforms, has that changed how you had to interact with people who might be trolls or, like any backlash around that, compared to, say, if you're covering a story on the news and people don't like what you're saying and they're unhappy and they let you know about it? Like, has that changed, or
do you know what?
is it the same?
Really,
like, what's that like?
Fortunate that I, touch wood, I hardly ever get, I mean, if I do and it's somewhere, I don't see it. So the only reason I don't follow any news sources on things like Facebook is because I don't want to be tempted to go in and dive into the horrific trough of comments. So I don't follow any of them on that because I don't want to see comments. It's not that I don't want to see news, I don't want to see comments on anything. So I don't personally receive a lot. I mean, you'll get the occasional, like, someone being a bit of a dick, but who cares? But it's, yeah, so, but when I worked in television, it was incredibly different. People are ruthless and brutal, and people are ruthless and brutal on online. And I used to speak out about it quite a bit because I felt like we're so, we want to protect our young people and their mental health and our alarming suicide rates and that. And it's like, hang on a minute. If we've got adults here being dicks to other adults online, and you've got kids, like, I remember quite often you'd see someone that had said something really mean about you and you'd click on their profile and it's someone with like 3 kids in their photo of, and you're thinking, what are you doing? And so I think it's a real shame that we've allowed the floodgates to open in terms of how people are allowed to speak about other people publicly now. Before social media, you either had to just either not man up, but like brave up and march down the streets for what you believed in, or you had to ring talkback, and even ringing talkback takes you've still got to put your voice to something or write a letter to the editor. Now you don't even need any of that. You can fire off a comment, and so I worry about that, and I wish that it wasn't that way, and I wish we haven't allowed it to be that way. But I've learned a lot to ignore it, because the dumb thing is we're all a bit like this, where 99 people might tell you look nice one day, but one person says something bad, and that's all you remember. So if you just remove yourself from that and realize that it doesn't matter what they think, you can't. Not everyone is going to like you. I understand that. I don't like everyone, but what's your behavior towards it, for that person? And so as long as you appreciate that when you're in a role that is quite public and you involve your personality and that kind of stuff, of course you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I get sick of myself sometimes. So it's just finding that balance of knowing that it's okay to not be liked or validated by everyone, but also, if you need to call someone out that's being a bad person, then actually, absolutely do that. And I will do that. I would always do that.
And I think I agree with you with that. This kind of if you don't see it, then you're just not aware of it. And I don't think that is kind of hiding your head in the sand with it. It's just, if you don't need to engage with people who don't agree with anything of what you're saying, then you don't have to make yourself feel bad by going in and reading every single comment that they've put about you being, whatever it is that they've said.
Yeah, don't read the comments.
No. Yeah. Brodie, you've always been active. As I understand it, you've kind of grown up with a bit of a kind of a competition fire in you, and you've done a number of different sports and things like that. You mentioned surf life saving, obviously. Active family. Your mum, did she swim, cook straight?
She did. Yeah.
That is amazing. Has she ever said, come on, Brodie, it's going to be a family tradition? Or?
Oh, I've told her I've made it. Well, it's funny when she did it. So she did it when she was 40. She had first paced with a guy when she was 16. So she's done quite a bit of swimming in that piece of water. And then so she'd promised herself that she'd come back and do it when she was 40. And I remember, so I must have been 10. And I thought it was really cool, obviously, back then. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then as I got older and wiser, I was like, I could not think of anything worse. Swimming for 10 hours in the middle of the ocean? No, not interested.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Having said that, though, you are a bit of a go-getter, you've obviously, you trained for the Kepler. You didn't quite make it, as I understand, injury. Mm-hmm. Done the team coast to coast, done the varying legs of that, and now you must have been one of the first people on. Apparently, the coast to coast sold out in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. I was ready, and I was ready, and I was poised, and then watching the countdown, and then I just entered it, no qualms.
Amazing. Yeah, that is amazing.
And then it was oh, okay, so you've entered it now. I mean, if it had sold out and I'd missed out, oh well, never mind. But then it was oh, okay. It was really easy. Now I've got to do it.
Yeah, that's true, Brodie. But first of all, you've got Hawke's Bay Marathon. Is that right?
Yeah. So that's May the 15th. Yeah. So not actually that far away.
Not that far away. So outside of just kind of being active, obviously you're and being fit, what other benefits do you get from just kind of deciding that you're going to sign up to these? I'm not going to say crazy things, because let's face it, I love things like this as well, but what's your motivation and drive?
I think there's a number of things that make them very addictive, and nothing can describe you can't explain to someone the amazing feeling of getting to an event and the camaraderie that comes with it, and that's often with complete strangers, and just being immersed in something where all of a sudden all these people have turned up on a start line, and everyone's got their own story to tell or their own journey that they've had to reach to get there, and there's a lot of people there that are set out to win it, and that's cool. They sprint off or whatever off and away they go. But the rest is just a great bunch of people who've, for whatever reason, decided to give it a crack, and you're around them. And, you know, remember the first couple of early half marathons and stuff that I did, it was like, my God, there's an old guy in front of me, you know, and you were like, now, but then you're like, actually, awesome. Or, you know, there's just all sorts of tall, short, you know, old, young, all sorts of people that are all doing these things. And I just think that, and it's just everyday people doing remarkable things. So being immersed in something like that is really, really inspiring. And, you know, I cry when I watch people finish something, you know, the finish line always makes me cry. So that's a part of it, but also really learning to what limits you can push yourself to. And I think that what that does in a physical sense is teach you what you can push yourself to do mentally. So when you've done something, you know, like last year with Queenstown Marathon, which went absolutely off the grid, fully, plans fell apart. It was the hardest day of my life. But then the lessons that you teach yourself about how you got yourself through that are like massive in terms of flipping them into everyday life. So just learning about yourself and what you're capable of is quite amazing too.
Yeah, and to be fair, you this is what you're doing in your professional life as well, right? And what you've done through your personal life with the change in your career, your change in your locations, you're going overseas, you're coming back. You seem to have like put quite a bit in your 35 years, Brodie, and you're only 35, you know. So what's it look like for you in the next few years? Like, do you have a bit of a plan kind of set out, or are you letting things organically roll out? What's the story?
Look, I think that as much as I have said previously that I like to have goals and I like to have plans, in terms of the business and that at the moment, I'm quite happy to see what happens this year. Like, I've got things that I want to achieve, but then I'm like, well, if it doesn't happen because something else happened, you know, like part of it's quite amazing where you just never know what's going to jump in your inbox of any week of an opportunity. Yeah. So I kind of would like to see how this evolves actually sort of take it's not about not controlling it, but sort of letting things happen as well around me, at least for another year, because, you know, people say first 2 years in business is really, really tough at least. So I'm kind of quite open to that. Yeah, so that's I'm letting that happen. You know, we've got plans within the kind of things that we want to do with the Girls Uninterrupted podcast and some video content plans and stuff that I want to roll out. But I am also just going to see what happens. And then obviously, like, then there's some quite physical stuff like the coast to coast. So there'll be a fair whack of training that'll have to go into that. So that'll be once I finish this marathon training, I'll have to get back on the bike, which I don't really feel that excited about, but I'm going to learn to love it. And then,
as you do.
And then, yeah, I mean, just see what happens. I think we're all probably coming quite accustomed to the fact that there is a bit of uncertainty around life in general at the moment. So if you just sort of focus on the now and what you can control, then, you know, leave the other stuff, because it can get too worrying for people. Or you can't worry about what you can't control.
Yeah, no, that's such good advice. And I've got to say, as someone who's followed you for a few years, I feel like I'm probably like a lot of your audience, and is just so pleased to see how you've evolved over the last year, you know, and because it would have been a bit of a sad space had we not had access to Brodie Kane in other ways, other than if you happen to live in Christchurch and you're up early enough to listen to morning radio. So I'm loving seeing what you're bringing out, and really looking forward to what's to come. Not with like, and first up, of course, is that damn marathon, which will be amazing. I'm unhappy I'm unable to do it this year, but, you know, next year, hopefully.
Well, it's I'm actually really excited because the goal for this one is to just actually race it really well. So
I love it.
Okay, whatever time is, you know, okay, what happened last time when you worried about time? You blew out. So now let's just go and race it beautifully, run it and love it.
That's it, Brodie, and that's what you're doing with your business. It's you in the process of it. If you do what you know what you kind of set up in order to achieve that goal, the goal will happen. You know, like it's about focusing on the process, not the outcome. Awesome.
From you too, that was wise. That was very wise.
I am very wise. Brodie Kane, thanks for chatting to me today.
Oh, thank you.
Lovely. See you.
Bye.
All right, team, hope you enjoyed that. And next week, we're going to take a bit of a geeky dive into low carb and ketogenic diets for people with type 1 diabetes with someone I came across from Dom D'Agostino's lab, Andrew Kutnick, who is a postdoctoral fellow within Dom D'Agostino's lab. Andrew is a PhD researcher studying the influence of nutrition and metabolism on health, disease, and performance. And he himself has type 1 diabetes, and so he is a wealth of information from his own experience and research into the efficacy of a low carbohydrate diet for type 1 diabetes. And this is going to be one of two. So if you are interested in those kind of topics, that'll be dropping next Wednesday. Until then though, you can catch me on Twitter at Mikki Williden, Instagram by the same handle, Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, or jump on the internet, mikkiwilliden.com, where you can sign up to my weekly email or one of my meal plans, where you get access to a 28-day meal plan, shopping list, and the ability just to ask me any questions that you have, how to individualize your nutrition approach to optimize what you want to achieve. So that's over at Mikki Williden Nutrition. If you like Mikkipedia, absolutely go to your podcast platform, hit subscribe, tell your mates. I'd love it. And until then, have a fab week. Catch you next week. See you later.